You are listening to The Art of Sales. Everyone sells every day, and this is your source for conversational, real-world sales and prospecting methods that you are comfortable using and that get results. You'll help people buy instead of pushing them into being sold. Here's your host, Art Subcheck.
All right, here's a quiz question for you. I'd like you to answer this. Here we go. In sales, the size of your paycheck is most directly proportional to A, the size of your territory, B, the size of your callback file, C, the size of your alma mater, or D, none of the above. Okay, do you have your answer? Well, it's D, none of the above. In sales, your paycheck, which I probably should assume is tied to your sales success, is most directly proportional to the size of your thinking. That's right. The most successful sales professionals I've ever had the good fortune to know and work with over the years weren't necessarily the most educated or experienced or skilled or even lucky for that matter. They were the ones who expected to do well, and not just well enough to meet quota. They anticipated blowing away their numbers consistently and earning more money and exceeding results like never before. And that's the topic of today's show. I've got a number of ways for you to change your thinking so you can change the size of your paycheck and your success and your happiness for that matter. Are you ready? Okay, let's get started. So it's quite simple, really. Think large and your actions and success will follow. And likewise, that's true with small thinking. Now, the good news is you're in complete control of this. As the philosopher Disraeli said, life is too short to be little. So let's look at specific ways that big thinking translates into action and also big results in prospecting and sales and what you can do about it. It's not that tough. So given the choice, would you as a sales pro call the headquarters of a huge company where you could potentially find a buyer who can buy a lot of what you sell, or maybe a tiny one-person lawn service? So big thinkers get stars in their eyes thinking about the opportunities within a big company. And within that company, the multiple contacts and the departments, all of them potential buyers, and the possibility of huge orders and larger paychecks. And small thinkers, on the other hand, don't even consider going after the biggest companies. Sure, they've maybe got these companies on their dream list, but that's where it stops. They think, well, they're never going to want to buy from little old me. And consequently, they get stuck in the endless follow-up calls to small prospects, people who have little revenue and profit potential, and they waste time when they do sell some of these dealing with the high maintenance demands of the tiny accounts, maybe some that shouldn't have even been opened up in the first place. So here's what you can do. Here's an action step for you. Sit down, pen and paper. Identify the top 20% of your companies or your own customers. Now, these are the biggest ones, providing your highest level of profits and sales. All right, the top 20% or even the top 10%. Then what you want to do, analyze their defining characteristics, such as their size, their industry, any commonalities that they have. Then it's pretty simple. What you want to do is you want to locate similar prospects to go after and then put the machine in motion. Just go do it. It's not that difficult. Most sales reps have a comfort level regarding the titles of prospects, the sizes of customers that they're going to go after, They they start low and they wonder why they're stuck in molasses when they're trying to move a sales forward. Maybe you felt the same frustration. Starting low and staying there means you run into a lot of these self-important middle managers. They're overworked, they're underpaid, and don't get me started even about purchasing agents who are also inundated with calls from other salespeople. And some of these people are so afraid to make decisions that they make none at all. And when I sit down, when I work with clients and I look at the notes of sales reps in their CRM system, many times I'll see a series of notes with things like, not ready yet, still in committee, call back in 2 weeks. And it's just frustrating. Maybe you've been there. According to David Peoples in his book, Selling to the Top, he says, and I'm quoting, calling at a higher level is an easier sell. It's faster, it's less work, your product or service has more value, and you have less competition and can charge a higher price. Well, that sounds good, doesn't it? Anthony Perinello named these higher level people VITO. That's VITO, which stands for Very Important Top Officer. In his book, Selling to Vito, Perinello says that Vitos are different than most buyers. Some lower level people might worry about protecting their own behind and impressing upon other people and holding on to their own shaky position, where Vitos are straightforward. They want to improve the company's bottom line. They do that by raising revenue, lowering expenses, improving efficiency. They won't waste your time if you don't waste theirs. And the potential here for you is huge. So I've got another action step for you. Call several levels above where most people, and maybe you, start right now. Now, word of caution here, you got to be thoroughly prepared to discuss how the results of your product or service are going to favorably impact the big picture within the organization. Now, of course, our prior episodes up to this point, that's what we're talking about, right? Working on your results statement, your opening, not talking about your thing. All of those aspects are critical when you're calling Vitos, or anybody for that matter. All right, so getting back to thinking and acting big. I, for a long time, have suggested the Tiger Woods attitude regarding call objectives. Now, snicker if you might, and whether or not you like him personally, and certainly he's had some rough time with some physical and, some other challenges the past few years, but he's making a nice comeback right now. And when Tiger was in his prime, I mean, he was just absolutely unbeatable, and he expected to win every tournament he played, and not by just a little, by a lot. And many times he did. So what are your expectations as you prepare going into a sales call or any type of interaction or negotiation? Some sales reps approach their calls with, well, I just want to see if there might be any interest there. And let's say they do call and there is some interest there. Sometimes they're shocked. And then they quickly get off the phone after they say, oh, well, let me email you some information. I'll get right back. I'll get back to you in a week. Hey, high achievers expect to take their calls and their meetings as far as they possibly can every time. And as a result, a greater percentage of the time, they do. They begin calls with specific, ambitious objectives, whether it be the sale or the appointment or a lot of movement towards the end goal. Let me give you a few points here to consider. Think about this. If anyone has ever made a sale from your company on an initial prospecting call or a first meeting or contact, think about that. If that has happened, even though it may not be the norm, it's possible. Right? So why wouldn't we make that our ultimate objective on every single contact? I'm big on this. So many people have this objective of, oh, well, in the first contact, I just want to get some material in their hands. Hey, if the music is still playing, stay on the dance floor. Even if you don't reach your ultimate objective most of the time, which you probably won't, the math works on this. You're going to consistently reach higher levels than you would have otherwise if you had low expectations. Oh, and think about how much time you can save by moving people to a decision more quickly, regardless of what that decision ultimately is. So here's your action step here. Approach every call and every meeting with the expectation of achieving the highest conceivable end result. Now, of course, you're not going to get there every time, but you know what? Your results over time will be much higher than if you had low or no expectations. A little bit more on this. Negotiators use a technique called the theory of contrast that's just as applicable for us in sales. And it states that you should ask for more than you expect or offer less than you expect to pay. It's called contrast because the price or the amount or ultimate solution arrived at appears small, contrasted to what was originally asked for. Let me give you an example, a personal example. So for years, I've told the story of how when my son, this is over 20 years ago, he was 10 years old at the time. And we went shopping for basketball shoes. That was always our ritual, fun thing for us. And one year, he dragged me over to the display of the newest, highest tech cushion sole high-tech models endorsed by someone I'd never heard of. And these particular shoes, they were priced well into the $100 plus range. Now, understand, at the time, in the mid-90s, that was a huge amount of money to pay for basketball shoes. So I said to him, $110? You got to be kidding me. There's no way. So then he just kind of sulked over to another part of the store and went over to another display. And then he sheepishly handed me a basic Air Jordan model of basketball shoes. And I looked at the price, and it was a mere $69 compared to the other shoes that I think came with an instruction manual. Now, I felt like I hit the lottery, since it wasn't until later that I realized he had skillfully executed the theory of contrast, where you ask for more than you expect. So think about this. What it does is that it establishes a psychological standard in the mind of the other person. Now, if such a standard already existed, say a price the other person was thinking of paying, the much higher asking price immediately raises that level that they had in their mind. For example, when I decided I wanted a nice quality leather chair for my office, I didn't know the going prices. My expectation was, maybe a couple $100. Well, wrong. My eyes were open and suddenly my spending ceiling had risen over the $1,000 mark. Investment professionals do this all the time. They'll ask a prospect if they have $100,000 to invest if the opportunity was right. Now, this scares away the people who have no intention of investing. And what it also does is it often raises the starting amount that an interested investor might start with. Maybe somebody who is thinking of starting at $10,000 all of a sudden might be thinking of $30,000 or $50,000. The theory of contrast also allows the other person to feel good about the transaction. It gives them a victory. I mean, really, all negotiating should be win-win, and this helps accomplish that objective. If, for example, let's say you're authorized to maybe drop price a little bit to win business. Yeah, it happens. You should always start with the full price, which is more than maybe someone expects to get in the sales process. Then what you can do is use the lower price as a concession in exchange for getting something else, like a larger order. Let me give you some theory of contrast tips that you can use. I've got some rules and ideas for using this. So when you're asking, first, don't make a larger request if it's not in the buyer's best interest. So in other words, don't go for large sales just so you can make more money. That always comes back to bite you in the butt later. I mean, customers resent having money tied up in things they realize later they can't use. That's just not good for repeat business, and it's not professional sales. Next, get rid of your own self-imposed limitations. A sales manager, a client of mine at the time, of a direct seller of wine, showed me the cubicles of two people who sat side by side. And he said, these people were of equal education, experience, and natural ability, but one outsold the other consistently by about 2-1. So the difference was the higher seller asked for multiple case orders of wine. Well, the other one just kind of suggested a couple bottles at a time. Now, the next point is be reasonable with your request. I mean, think big and ask big for sure. But hey, again, be reasonable. If you get too crazy, some people won't even consider countering. All right, so here's your action step. Actually, I got some specific word-for-word suggestions for you for asking big. Now, you can probably disregard the numbers here because these may not be applicable for what you're selling. So just insert your own numbers, big numbers, and focus on the approach. All right, so these are just word-for-word questions. Have you thought about how many you want? Maybe 1,000? Based on what you told me, it seems like 2,000 units should be a good start for you. What do you think? Would 150 be enough for you? Let's say we start you with a 5-year agreement. Will that work? I recommend that you start with 10,000. All right. So let's wrap things up here. So what's the difference between high and low performing sales professionals? Well, self-confidence, belief in themselves, and their expectations. And that all has to do with the size of what? That's right, their thinking. But you might be asking, what about skill? Oh yeah, sure, it's important. But I've seen plenty of reps who had the tools to succeed, but not the desire or the expectation. And I've seen many who would never be called naturals when they're first starting, but they expected to do well, and they found ways to make it happen. Napoleon Hill, in his Law of Success, said, if you demand success of yourself and back up this demand with intelligent action, you're sure to win. There is a difference, though, between demanding success and merely wishing for it. In The Psychology of Winning, Dr. Dennis Waitley said, every individual tends to receive what he or she expects. You may or may not get what's coming to you, but you will always get what you expect. Losers typically expect a little, and they get it. Worse, low-level performers expect bad things to happen, and you know what? They do. You've probably seen these people before. They can darken a room just by entering it. They're the ones consistently complaining about everything from the coffee in the break room to how bad their territory is. And all the while, the action-oriented, expectant sales pro is doing what the others say can't be done. And by the way, how do you know what you can't do? I'm not talking about what you think you can't do. Those are the self-imposed limitations that are holding you back. These are limitations you've been believing up to this point, the stories you tell yourself. Really, when you analyze it, there is very little you're not capable of if you really try. And unless you really try, you're never going to know for sure. So why wouldn't you set a larger target for yourself and say to yourself, why not? Why couldn't I? When you realize what you've been missing, you're going to be more motivated to go after your goals. So I challenge you right now, bust out of that comfort zone in each of the areas that we've been discussing here. Think and act larger. And I know that your sales and your income and your happiness are going to be in direct proportion to your own thinking. All right. Now, of course, we're going to end with something else related to thinking.
Your attitude will be I am never will, never feel what they say. sales quote of the day.
That's right, the quote of the day. A quick story. I got into self-development starting in high school. The very first book I read on self-development was How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, and that changed my life. And then shortly thereafter, I read The Magic of Thinking Big by Dr. David Schwartz. That's one of the greatest books on self-development of all time. I highly recommend it. There's so much wisdom and inspiration in that book. And although it was written almost 60 years ago, the information still is timeless. So I'm going to share a quote with you from that book. And it's really so much more than a quote. It's a life lesson. So here it is. The point is this: big thinkers are specialists in creating positive, forward-looking, optimistic pictures in their own minds and in the minds of others. To think big, we must use words and phrases that produce big, positive mental images. Wow, good stuff. I would suggest you rewind and play that several times, and not just listen to it, but do it. Produce those big, positive mental images. All right, if you're getting value from this show, will you please help at least 2 other people by telling them about it? They will appreciate you, and of course, so will I. So please send them to our show site, which is The Art of Sales, theartofsales.com. If you're listening on iTunes, I'll really appreciate your 5-star rating and a quick review, okay? All right. Thanks again so much for investing your time with me. Go out and make it your best sales day ever. I'm Art Sobczak.